At a private clinic, Brigitte, a patient, suddenly jumps into a pond without clothes. She's trying to get the attention of her doctor, Pierre-François, hoping he will marry her. But when he sees her from the window, he isn't impressed. He thinks she simply needs more treatment. Pierre-François isn't working at that moment. He's getting his heart checked by his wife, Dr. Gabby, who is also his colleague. Elsewhere, at a local fair, Odile watches a group of dancers perform to draw a crowd. Jean-Jean, the man running the show, notices her and assumes she wants to join. Odile gives a polite smile, but walks away, not wanting to disturb anything. As she tries to leave, Jean-Jean stops her and asks if she needs work. Odile tells him she already has a job. She's a tennis player. Still, Jean-Jean offers her a spot in the show, thinking she might change her mind. Odile doesn't say yes, but she doesn't say no either. He tells her the fair will stay until the end of the week if she decides to return. At the clinic, Dr. Gabby finds out that Pierre-François has a heart problem, a narrowing that could be dangerous. She tells him he needs to go to the hospital and avoid anything that might put stress on his heart, especially at night. Pierre-François calmly tells her there's nothing to worry about, saying he's not as energetic as he used to be. Later, during Brigitte's session, Pierre-François gets distracted as he sees her drying off after swimming. Brigitte notices and playfully tells him they can begin the session now. He scolds her for not taking things seriously, but continues with the appointment. Brigitte admits she acted foolishly earlier, but says it was because she remembered him once saying he'd marry her if she disobeyed him. Pierre-François is surprised and doesn't recall making such a promise. Brigitte ignores his doubts and begins talking about plans for their so-called wedding. Not wanting to hear more, he changes the topic and asks if she's still taking her medication. She says yes, every morning and night, and adds that she thinks about him just as often. This makes Pierre-François even more unsure about his work, and he ends the session early. That night, Pierre-François calls his ex-wife, Chantal, to let her know he plans to return a painting. He says he no longer has interest in it. The next day on the train, he sees Odile sleeping in a nearby seat. He quietly watches her, feeling curious and unexpectedly drawn to her calm appearance. At the same time, Odile is dreaming about being close with someone she cares about in public, something she wishes she could do in real life. She suddenly wakes up and is surprised to see Pierre-François standing nearby. Instead of being upset, she kindly asks him to let her know when they reach their stop. He agrees, happy to help, and tells her they'll be getting off at the same station. Later, at the beach, Pierre-François meets with Chantal and tells her about his health issue. Chantal becomes worried, but he jokes about it to make the situation seem less serious. Not far from them, he notices Odile enjoying the beach. Her energy and presence leave a strong impression on him. After talking with Chantal, he takes the train home. Hoping to see Odile again, he looks for her on board. But she's not there, and he feels disappointed. Back at the clinic, he tries to comfort Brigitte, who seems upset whenever the topic of Odile comes up. But the neuropsychiatrist listening to her grows tired and overwhelmed by the way she describes her thoughts. He tells her they sound unrealistic and suggests she stop sharing them. Feeling hurt by his response, she throws her drink on him. Soon after, Pierre-François feels chest pain again. The next day, he tries to clear his mind by going for a bike ride, but as he speeds down a hill, he loses control and crashes into a tennis court. His frustration fades when he sees Odile practicing on the court. He feels lucky to see her again. After her session, he walks up and reminds her they met on the train, but Odile doesn't respond and quietly heads to her car. Pierre-François follows, pretending he's lost, just to talk to her a little longer. Odile, clearly in a rush, tries to leave even as he stands in front of her car. Though surprised by her coldness, Pierre-François asks her to wait and listen. He shares that he feels something for her, hoping to connect, but Odile misunderstands, thinking he's only interested in her appearance. She tells him he should look elsewhere if that's what he's after. Pierre-François tells Odile that he isn't trying to bother her. He just wants to get to know her better. If she prefers to stay private, he asks if he can simply watch her tennis practice now and then. Odile is puzzled and asks why. He replies that watching her practice brings him peace. He even offers to pay, saying he finds her presence uplifting. Odile smiles at the compliment, but politely declines. She explains that she's too busy preparing for an important exam. Still, Pierre-François tries to convince her to skip studying for one evening and have dinner with him. That night, however, Odile decides not to meet him. Instead, she goes to the fair and watches Jean-Jean as he introduces performers to the crowd, trying to sell tickets to his show. Though she's still unsure, Odile finds herself thinking again about joining the act. Out of nowhere, Pierre-François appears beside her. He doesn't get upset that she missed their dinner. He assumes she might be nervous, just like him. Worried she might not recognize him without his beard, he asks what she thinks of his new look. Odile compliments him, saying he looks younger, which makes him smile. Jean-Jean, spotting them together, steps in and encourages Odile to let Pierre-François buy a ticket. He promises that once Pierre-François sees the show, he'll come out changed. Pierre-François thinks Jean-Jean is exaggerating and tells Odile they should leave. But Odile stands her ground. She wants to see the show for herself. Pierre-François tries to stop her, saying the place isn't clean and might be full of bugs. Still curious, Odile enters the tent, and Pierre-François follows, unsure but unwilling to leave her alone. Inside, Odile watches the performance with growing interest. She admires one of the dancers and dreams of performing one day too. Meanwhile, Pierre-François is uneasy. He tries to stay calm, worried about his heart condition. After the show, Odile drives him back to the clinic. He tells her he enjoyed their time together. To his surprise, Odile doesn't feel the same. When he tries to get closer to her, she feels uncomfortable and asks him to leave the car. He steps out, clearly disappointed. Later that night, at home, Odile suddenly feels dizzy and has a nosebleed, which frightens her. The next morning, a doctor visits her to check her condition. Odile rests in bed and drifts into a dream where she imagines Pierre-François watching her with admiration. In the dream, she walks into a changing room but suddenly collapses. Later that day, Jean-Jean asks Odile about her connection with Pierre-François. She lies and says he's her uncle, trying to avoid suspicion. What really bothers her, though, is why Pierre-François acted like he didn't know her the night before. He explains that he was focused on work and didn't mean to ignore her. Changing the subject, Jean-Jean tells her that if she joins his group of performers, they'll be traveling to Angulem. Odile asks why they need to go so far, and he says it's the best place to keep her identity private. At the fair, Odile spends time with the dancers in Jean-Jean's group. She learns from Chipper that after the fair season, they take small jobs in Paris to earn extra money. Curious, Odile asks if the audience ever crosses boundaries. Siska admits that some men offer large sums of money in hopes of getting close, but she says she usually turns them down. However, if she likes someone, she might give it more thought. Wagon adds that when she sees how much the audience wants to see them perform, it motivates her to do her best on stage. Then, the dancers ask Odile what she wants from the crowd. She answers simply, she wants to leave a strong impression and make them remember her. That same day, while Odile is teaching tennis, she gets a phone call. She's surprised to hear Pierre-François on the line. He apologizes for how he acted the night before, and Odile accepts his apology. Oddly, she says the way they met was interesting, which makes Pierre-François wonder if she's being playful. Odile changes the topic and asks if he's free on Sunday. When he says yes, she invites him to join her on a trip to Angulem. Pierre-François is caught off guard. He knows Angulem has a reputation for being a wild place. To ease his concern, Odile says she's going there to visit her aunt. He agrees to come along. On Sunday, Pierre-François rides in Jean-Jean's car with the group. To his surprise, he enjoys the trip and the company. Once they arrive in Angulem, Jean-Jean drops Pierre-François off at a restaurant and tells him to wait. Meanwhile, Jean-Jean takes Odile to a nearby fair, which is run by his friend, the so-called aunt. When they arrive, the man quickly approaches, and Jean-Jean introduces Odile to him. Jean-Jean proudly talks about Odile's athletic talent, but the man running the fair isn't impressed. He tells him he's seen other performers just like her. Odile's cheerful mood fades, but since they're already there, she agrees to go through with the audition. On the way, she quietly admits she didn't prepare a routine. Still, the man insists she performs something. Odile repeats that she's not ready and nervously asks if she can just stand on stage instead. Before deciding, the man asks Jean-Jean if Odile is his girlfriend. He says yes. With that, the man tells Odile to stay dressed and simply try to dance. After the audition, Odile hides nearby to take care of a nosebleed. She overhears Jean-Jean saying goodbye to the man and begins to worry. She quickly approaches him and asks if she was rejected. Jean-Jean reassures her, saying his friend is still thinking about it. Then Odile brings up something that's been bothering her. Why did he call her his girlfriend? Jean-Jean replies that every performer needs passion in their life, and right now she seems to be missing it. He warns that this lack of energy could hurt her on stage. Odile tells Jean-Jean she doesn't need a romantic partner, but he disagrees. Later, at the restaurant, she lightly jokes about Pierre-François looking unhappy. He admits she's right. Odile says she thought Pierre-François enjoyed their trip. He agrees, but admits he feels misled and hurt. Jean-Jean adds that Odile doesn't really care about him. She stays silent, especially when he mentions her aunt. As tension rises, Odile asks the waitress for directions to the train station. That night, Pierre-François struggles. His motel is stuffy, the bathroom's occupied, and he's chased by a dog. By morning, Odile returns and quietly hugs him. Though moved, Pierre-François feels uneasy about his growing feelings. Odile asks Pierre-François to face her, and she sees that he looks weak and confused. He tells her about a vision that changed him, a woman rising from a well, and says he wants to leave his career behind to stay near her, even if it means taking a simple job. He's already spoken to Jean-Jean and urges Odile not to hesitate, saying time is short. He admits how much she means to him and how deeply she's affected him since they met. After drinking some water, he tells her she's the last woman he'll ever care for. Touched by his words, Odile stays close to comfort him. As he starts feeling worse, he asks her to just rest with him through the night. After Pierre-François falls asleep, Odile quietly gets up and notices another nosebleed. The next morning, Jean-Jean rushes in and tells her it's time for her first performance. Pierre-François wakes, confused, and Jean-Jean explains what's happening. At the tent, the show's manager approves Odile's appearance and assigns her a costume. While Odile gets ready, a dancer quits after complaining about how the audience treats them. Odile is asked to take her place. Before she goes on stage, Jean-Jean encourages her. Odile smiles, ready to perform. As Odile prepares for her first performance, she suddenly feels unwell but decides to continue for the sake of the show. She follows the routine as instructed, and the crowd responds with excitement. Even though she is in pain, she pushes through, determined to finish. But during the performance, her body gives out, and she collapses into the audience. Pierre-François, alarmed, rushes through the crowd to reach her. To his shock and sorrow, he finds that Odile has died, with blood coming from her nose. Later, Jean-Jean drives Pierre-François back home. Both are quiet and saddened as they read a letter Odile left behind. In the letter, she explains that she had another serious nosebleed the day before. She admits this had been happening often, and she was planning to return to the hospital for treatment. Back in their city, Pierre-François wakes up alone in the car. He steps out and walks home, thinking about everything that happened. As he reflects on his time with Odile, he begins to accept both his feelings and the uncertainty of the future.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.